YouTube, going the Goat House is back. Today we're going to go over some trade candidates. We'll talk about landing spots and predictions as well. Some of these players are kind of trade/cut candidates. A lot of them being brought up either again or for the first time very recently. Things are starting to heat up. These players could be traded or cut. As I'm talking right now, it's getting that serious out there. So excited to break it down. We have recent free agency prediction videos, 2 of them, loads of free agents on there. We have a whole playlist full of free agency content there, so check it out. Join us for when free agency begins. We'll have live breaking news, rumors, thoughts on Twitter, and then we'll have reactions and grades for all the signings pretty much as they happen here on the channel. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on, follow our Twitter. Link down below for anything you're looking for. Here's our Twitters. A lot of updates, talk, a lot going on right now, a lot involving Deshaun Watson. We were talking about that too, so check it out. First one, La'el Collins. Cowboys been talking about possibly trading him last few days. I think his value, it sounds like it's dropping, though. It sounds like the Cowboys really want to move on from him, which is a little odd that they feel like they have to. But the same situation with Amari Cooper, they felt like they had to. They traded him for next to nothing. You know, if they trade La'el Collins, a very solid right tackle with I think it's an expensive but team-friendly contract. I mean, you can't trade next to nothing for that. You just can't. You can't cut him either. So, I mean, honestly, a very good right tackle with a team-friendly contract. He should be worth a late one, but they're most certainly not going to get that at this point. It just feels like a day 2 pick. Could it be dropping? The Cowboys are getting desperate. Should they be that desperate? So could you have him for less? Teams that could use a right tackle, teams that also could pay him are listed right there. I feel like he's going to end up with the Bengals. I kind of thought that from the beginning, too. I've heard other teams. I've heard specifically the Dolphins, the Broncos, and the Jags have been involved. It wouldn't surprise me if these other teams are involved. Really sounds like the Dolphins are very interested. So it's possible he goes to a team like that. But I just really had the feeling since I heard his name come out that the Bengals land him because they're looking for a right tackle. They could insist on Jonah Williams at left tackle still. I think that's very realistic to think, and they could look to. So they trade for the tackle that they need, and they sign the interior guys that they're looking for here. So they trade for Collins. Let's see how much his value drops. They should be able to get. It sounds like they should be able to get a steal at this point. Whoever adds Collins. So because what the Cowboys are up to. So the feeling is he ends up with the Bengals. I'd look out for those. I listed all the teams that I could see adding them, but the first few teams I listed and talked about already, I'd look out for those teams as well. Next up, Saquon Barkley. So reports came out earlier this morning that it sounds like he will be dealt. People, believe he really will be dealt, which, his name surfaced in trade talks almost a month ago, I'd say, and I was like, yeah, I don't really see him being traded. I think it's unlikely. I think Rapport put that out there too, but now it's sounding likely. So I'm a little hesitant to predict it still because I didn't think it was happening from the start. So it's still tough to fully see happen. Well, mainly because, the Giants aren't just going to give him away, but teams aren't just going to trade a high pick for him either because, they don't want to spend too much on running backs whether it comes to money and value. He has the injury concern, so it is a little tricky. Because it kind of came out very recently that it sounds like he'll be traded, I went ahead and made a prediction. The Texans are the team I see doing that. They have some space. They have the need at running back. I think they'd be open to re-signing him long-term after seeing him in action this year. I think they'd be willing to trade, what would he be worth? A 3rd-round pick? I would not trade anything more than that. I don't know if I would even trade that. The injury concern is serious with him, unfortunately. He needs a new deal, so it's tough. I've heard the Cardinals come up a bit, and that just confuses me unless they're getting him for very cheap. Because that would almost be, not their offseason, but they wouldn't be able to do much else after that. They traded a pick away for him. Wouldn't you just rather re-sign James Conner, who was fantastic for you last year, sign him for cheaper than what Barkley's going to cost, and then you can do some other things in free agency? So I wouldn't really agree with a team like the Cardinals, even though they've been brought up a little bit there. But the only one, look at these teams, and they all make sense for a running back. And the Chiefs are kind of a wild card, but I'd probably put them ahead of most of these teams. But really the only one that makes sense that I can actually, it wouldn't be a shocker if they trade for him or even a little bit surprised to be the Texans for the reasons I explained. So Texans can deal for Saquon. Do the Giants get desperate to move for him? Could they could they take a 4th-round pick for him? I think it's a possibility as well. So Texans are the team I would watch out for. Still a little on the fence if he actually gets dealt or not, though, so it's an interesting one. James Bradberry, we've been talking about this. We talked about him a lot. I think a 3rd or a 4th-round pick probably. The Giants are desperate for some space, so could it be that 4th-round pick? Some teams in need of a corner, like I mentioned before. It's a tricky situation because the Giants want to clear the space now, but teams want to see if they get the top cornerback free agents first before trading for Bradberry. So that could go fairly quick, though. Could the top corners, J.C. Jackson, Carlton Davis, Stephon Gilmore, could they come off the market right away? And the teams know. I keep going back to the Raiders. And I do think, though, I really think they'll try to get one of the big-time free agents, and they may land one. I was predicting them to go for J.C. Jackson. A day after I predict them to get J.C. Jackson, I'm keep hearing the Chargers are willing to pay what J.C. Jackson wants, perhaps, which is a ridiculous amount. So might be kind of leaning towards maybe the Chargers for a guy like that, and the Raiders could trade for Bradberry, which they can give an extension to. We know he fits Patrick Graham's defense, so could he be had for a 4th-round pick, maybe even cheaper? We saw Amari Cooper go for nothing. That would be fantastic for a team acquiring Bradberry, who's got a friendly, I think, deal this year and then can be extended as well. He's a solid corner. So just are the Giants giving guys away? How desperate are they? It's a little interesting. So I just keep thinking the Raiders are going to end up with Bradberry. So we'll see what ends up there. If they sign a big-time free agent corner right away in free agency, then probably not. And he ends up somewhere else that missed out on signing a corner. So that's kind of what the Giants are waiting for, what other teams are waiting for when it comes to Bradberry. Next up, Frank Clark. He's going to be moved or his deal's going to be reworked. Something has to happen here because it's just too expensive, the cap hit, the way it sits. If he were to be traded, it would have to be a late day 3 pick. Of course, his talent might say he's a little bit more than that, but that's just how it is right now. Chiefs looking to move on from him perhaps, or again, maybe rework the deal. So a late day 3 pick, some teams that I think are fit that could use the pass rusher. I don't think anyone's going to trade for him. I don't really see, he hasn't really worked out for the Chiefs recently, so why would you rework the deal unless it's a steal of a deal ends up being for the Chiefs? I don't know what that would be. Had to be a big-time pay cut. I just see them cutting him, making him a post-June 1st release, which would save them a lot more money then. That's kind of the tough part because the Chiefs would like the money now. They would like the space now, not the post-June 1st nonsense, So that's the tricky part here. So it'd be tough to see, but I've been hearing the Niners linked to them, and he actually makes sense as a fit opposite of Bosa. So I think Chiefs eventually, at least, maybe it's not right away, but cut him, and the 49ers end up picking him up. So that's my prediction there. Za'Darius Smith, impossible to figure out the value. I think he's a hell of a pass rusher. I think his value, in terms of his talents, just straight up his talent, I think he'd be a worth 1st-round pick. But big contract, expiring deal, needs a new deal, going to be pricey. The Packers are desperate to clear space. They may have no choice but to cut him, so they kind of lose leverage in all kind of trade. So does the value drop even more? It's a little tricky to figure out. I think loads of team, pretty much any team that needs a pass rusher that also can view him as a fit would be interested if he became available. So this is kind of my thoughts a couple weeks ago, and I'm kind of sticking to it. In Green Bay, it's tough to see them cut him. That's a loss, but they may have no choice. And then, maybe they extend Preston Smith, and the Chiefs end up with them kind of a better, younger version of a guy like Melvin Ingram, who worked out so well for the Chiefs last season. So, and they can look to add a guy like Za'Darius Smith. Could he end up back in Baltimore? I think I could see a lot of teams end up with him, but I really like the Chiefs. The Chiefs make a lot of sense. Maybe they don't make the Chiefs don't step on the gas for the pass rushers in free agency right away. Maybe they kind of sit around a little bit, try to get a receiver, and then when Za'Darius Smith is available, they kind of jump on that. So my prediction would be the Chiefs. This one, Danielle Hunter, came out yesterday that some teams, several teams called about Danielle Hunter of the Vikings, and it's a tricky one. I actually changed my prediction. I made the graphic, had a prediction, changed it, and it kind of says what it says down there may hint towards what my prediction was, but he's pretty valuable, and that's the tricky part on why at the end of the day, I'm thinking he won't be traded because can they match up on value? The Vikings don't really want to trade Hunter. He's an elite pass rusher, yes, elite when he's on the field, but he hasn't really been on the field much the last 2 years. And then I think teams are mainly calling because it's like, the Vikings, are they desperate moving on space? So, hey, we'll throw out an offer for Danielle Hunter. So maybe it's not at the actual value. Doesn't mean the Vikings have to accept it. So that's the tricky part. And they'll want a late first or a second round plus because they just don't want to get rid of their big-time pass rusher. So you see some teams that might be interested. The team we know for sure is interested is the Buffalo Bills. The tough part is they're very tight on cap. They can clear the space. They're going to have to do a lot of work to do that. And then if they do and get Hunter, it might be their offseason, which could be okay because they're a contending team. And if they get a legit pass rusher like this, they'd be in good business. So I was actually going to originally predict the Bills trading that 25th overall pick, which would tempt the Vikings. They may do it. And the reason why I think the Vikings could get desperate to trade him because they need to clear space. They don't have a whole lot of ways to do it. The easiest way, but not really the easiest way. The easiest way meaning if they traded Kirk Cousins, that clears a whole lot of space. They don't have to do anything else, but it's not that easy to trade Kirk Cousins. So it's a little tricky. If they can't really do it the other ways, maybe they have to trade Danielle Hunter. But again, I was thinking that maybe they restructure him, they clear some space. We talk about that being a possibility. And I'm thinking mainly teams are calling just to check in. Like, hey, if we can get a steal for this guy, we might as well check in because are they looking to clear space? So is anyone actually offering the 25th pick for an example? So that's a little tricky. So I was originally thinking the Bills and the Vikings do a deal involving a first-round pick and a star Vikings player again, Stephon Diggs in the last one. But I ended up changing my mind. I don't think the Vikings want to trade him. I don't think teams could reach in agreement on the compensation here. So that's what I got. That's what I got for right now. Speaking of Vikings, Kirk Cousins kind of been talked about a lot, kind of been linked to the Colts for right now. Nothing really happening. Sounds like the Vikings are in on Deshaun Watson. My prediction is no trade. I think if the Vikings get Deshaun Watson, then they will trade Kirk Cousins. I get the feeling they don't really want to trade Kirk Cousins because they want a quarterback, at least a decent quarterback. If they can get Deshaun Watson, which they're trying to, then they will find a home for Kirk Cousins. They will be desperate really to move on from him at that point. So leverage drops, trade value drops. Some team like the Colts would be my prediction if the Vikings got Watson, may actually get Cousins for way less than his value. So maybe the Colts are kind of wishing for something like that to happen if they do want Cousins. But yeah, I think it's not a long shot, but the Vikings would need to get Watson. They would need to find a partner for Cousins there to take on him, $35 million. So I just don't think they're in the business of giving him away. I think they need to have their replacement lined up. Not a lot of teams love this draft class, so it's tough to predict it to actually happen, even though it is possible, and the Vikings are maybe trying, but they're not gonna force it. They're not going to force this. So that'd be my prediction there for another Vikings player. And there's a lot of Vikings players being brought up, but we'll see what happens with them. Talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, this is a tricky one too because the Saints right now, as we speak, are so in on Deshaun Watson. And they very well could land him. And we'll talk about Deshaun Watson in a second, sort of. But basically, I think what the Saints need to bank on when it comes to Watson, for me to cut to the chase here, I think they need him to decide, I'm only going to play for the Saints to get him because other teams, I think, could beat their offer. Possibly the Saints don't have a lot of players to trade due to restructures. Can't really trade those players. But it's possible. It's possible that Watson says, hey, I'll only play for the Saints. I think it would be more likely if Sean Payton was there. If Sean Payton was still there, I might be predicting Watson to go to the Saints. So that's a little tricky part. I think with all the teams interested, is he likely to go to the Saints? Hard to say likely, but it's definitely a possibility they can make it happen, and they've been mentioned. So, and that kind of gets to Garoppolo. For some reason right now, I feel like he ends up with the Saints. I think he's going to sit around for a little bit. Tough to know if he'll be traded or cut. It's still a little tricky situation because he's injured. That kind of blew everything up there. We heard the Colts would be interested. I don't think the Colts want to sit around and wait to see if he's healthy or not. And the Colts, I think trading for Cousins is a possibility or going – I predicted Mariota in the last video, obviously, and then, as a bridge quarterback, a rookie. I think it's a possibility. If the Panthers miss out on Watson, they very well can do it. Really like the Steelers. They've been, linked to rookies, though, drafting a quarterback. So we'll see. I just feel like the Saints end up with him eventually, especially if he sits for a little bit. Saints kind of miss out on maybe their guy. Overtime, clearing space, get Garoppolo. That's kind of my feeling right now, but they're very much in on Deshaun Watson. And to talk about Deshaun Watson, I thought he kind of because it's so big, kind of deserved his own video here, and I still want to do a lot with that. So we'll see when we get to that, but near future here. But his value is 3 ones plus quite a bit more players, second-round picks perhaps. The teams we know that have shown interest: Panthers, Saints, Bucks, Seahawks, Browns, Vikings. The main ones are the first three, I'd say. The Panthers, the Saints, the Buccaneers. I think those are the main ones right now, all NFC South teams. Seattle, I've heard reports they're very much in. I've heard reports like, hey, they're dipping their toe in there, but they're not going to win an offer. They're not going to have the best offer. Cleveland, we heard, is, they're involved, but how much they can offer. We heard the Vikings thrown out. Not a lot of background on that, Vikings and Watson. And then Pittsburgh, from everything I've heard recently, is they're out. So there was like a report earlier in the week that says they're in, and then a bunch of reports after saying they're out. So we'll see. And then Philadelphia, based on what I've gathered, is they feel confident that Watson, basically from what Watson's told them in the past, that he doesn't want to play for them. If they get word that he'll play for them, they're going to jump back in. But it doesn't sound likely right now. So that's my take on that. Again, I want to have predictions and scenarios, and we'll probably have our own video for Deshaun Watson. So it's a tricky part because I don't think it's going to be rapid fire. Watson's going to choose his team. He's going to get traded. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but these teams kind of want it to be sped up a little bit because free agency starting right now. It's starting tomorrow, really. You can start to verbally agree with players. Players can agree with teams. So it's a little tricky, but we do know. I will say this. I talked about the Saints in the last slide. They're very much in on him. They're going to need Watson to say, I will only play for the Saints. To tell the Texans, I will only play for the Saints. And I don't know if with a team like the Bucks sitting around, I don't know if that's the case. I could see them saying I only play for the Saints or the Bucks because those are maybe the two top appealing teams. You could argue with some other teams in there as well. And then with the Panthers, if Watson says I'll play for any of these teams, I think he's going to the Panthers. My prediction, just straight up, I'll say it right now. If he says I will play for any of the teams interested, I think he's going to the Panthers. I'm pretty confident with that, actually, because I think they will have the best offer, which I'm pretty confident with. But will that actually be the case? He's interviewing with teams. I think he's going to pick his team. Tampa, debatable, might be the most appealing with the coaching staff, the weapons, both sides of the ball, the experience. So kind of can judge where I'm going with that, where if he were to choose his team and if it being one team. But we will see. We'll see what happens there. We'll talk more on Deshaun Watson. We're always talking on Twitter with everything with you guys answering questions. So those are some trade candidates and some predictions, landing spots for you guys because this stuff's starting to really heat up. Could the whole Watson thing slow things now? Could that happen? That's possible as well. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be crazy this week, so we'll have you covered. Live updates on our Twitter at GoDawsNFL. There's a link down below. Make sure you join us here on the channel for constant coverage. We'll have grades for every free agency signing throughout the week here coming up, so join us. It's going to do it for this one, though. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.